Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, February 21st. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris, and a special guest joining us today. Eric Longenhagen of FanGraphs is here. Eric, thank you so much for joining us during Prospect Week.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is what my face looks like, internet.
Have you been hiding your face from the internet for this long? That's amazing.
It is. It has. I have an appreciation for how accidentally famous people can get. Like the poor Hawk Tua girl.
Oh
You just do not know what you're dealing with. And it's not really in your control. I think one of my more proud moments is I was speaking at Sabre, and they had such trouble finding a photo of my face that from like one of my friends' weddings, there was a picture of me in the background, and they like cut the person. They accidentally had the person who was in the foreground like as the headshot of me in the program. And I was just like, okay, like I'm doing a good job at this.
So screen grabs from this show may be used as a future Eric Longenhagen headshot.
Yeah, let me give you as many like terrible ones. Just give awful announcing all the like terrible ones that
yeah, the one
possibly
where
use.
your eyes are like at half mast.
We get at least 3 of those every single episode where we're both blinking, sneezing, coughing, something all at the same time. It works out really, really well.
I have to say that you've made the right decision about social media generally.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I was early on that one, which I guess is like the prospect writer's credo is to like do. But yeah, that was more about me and how it was making me feel than like me reading the tea leaves about how it was going to trend. But I haven't like done the Bluesky jump because I just think like it's kind of the same, right? Like, so no thanks.
I mean, it's not it doesn't make me feel as bad about my life and the world, but. Yeah, it's an addiction, and it causes me not to be as present for my children and stuff. So it's like, generally I'd like to do less of it.
I could definitely feel when I got off there, it wasn't like my brain was like, okay, we're going to just read now. That's all you're going to want to do is be.
Yeah, what did you do?
It was just like, you're going to be really good at fantasy football this year, Eric. And, but like, my brain is messed up too from it in a way that is, I don't know if it's totally irreversible, but it's definitely an upstream swim for my attention being directed with my control.
Yeah, I've experienced the same thing. I don't have ADHD or anything like that, but I think I've developed some symptoms of it from a decade plus on social media. But our own struggles aside, let's talk prospects for a bit. Since it is Prospect Week, tons of great content rolling out over at FanGraphs. If you're listening and don't have a membership yet, you should get one. Support FanGraphs. Eric and the team there do phenomenal work. I want to ask you just a broad question first, because Keith Law hinted at this a couple of weeks ago on the show. He felt like it was harder this year than almost any year he's put together a top 100 to come up with a full top 100. Do you think the state of the minor leagues is generally down and that we're looking at more top-heavy lists going around the industry right now?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things at play with that. One is the way the rookie roster rules changed around the pandemic made it so that players just graduate more readily. All those September days you spend on the roster, they count against your rookie eligibility now. And so there are definitely players who have graduated from our lists who have lost rookie status the last 4 or 5 years who would not have before that, just because September roster days count. So that's one thing. The other thing is that...
Oh, wait, that's just like a really boring reason. That's funny. Those didn't used to count.
They did not.
I'm just saying the September days.
Pandemic year was the first year September roster days counted against your rookie eligibility, and it has persisted since then. So that's one reason. But then the other one is the proliferation of data, and now 4 or 5 years of that having occurred within my peer group. And I think over time you start to see the trends of who you get wrong and why, and what the warning signs in the data were that they wouldn't succeed earlier. And it just makes you more skeptical of those players at a time when there used to be unbridled enthusiasm for them in the lower minors. Like it's now when you have like a guy's chase rate instead of just his walk rate, or you have an end zone contact rate that is like a full standard deviation below the big league average, and that's what's happening at low A. it's much easier to know what the potential problems are and then bake that into the way you're evaluating or valuing the player. Those are the two big ones, I think. But I also think that this year's group at the very top, like there's not an Acuna or a Tatis or I like, these guys, the Roman Anthonys and Dylan Cruzes of the world, but there's not like that guy at the very top this year or a couple of them. At least I don't think so. I think there are a couple guys in the minors right now who within a year or two are going to be that guy. They'll have performed through the mid upper minors to the point where you have that degree of confidence that you can say Sebastian Walcott is going to be that player. But as of right now, I don't think you can do that.
When you were talking about the advanced stats, I was thinking about a little bit about Emmanuel Rodriguez in Minnesota, because when you look at the sort of FanGraphs stats on him, you're like, oh, the swinging strike is really low. He's really great sense of the zone, it looks like. Is he just uber passive? And then I think I heard something about his in-zone contact being really bad.
Yeah. Specifically with Emmanuel Rodriguez, it is like in that Trent Grisham area where not only is the in-zone contact is like not the worst, 74%. The overall contact is at 66%. There's a clear hole in that guy's swing. Yeah, and there are ways like splits with 2 strikes. Your chase rate with 2 strikes, I mean, obviously it should go up. Strategically, you want to spoil borderline pitches with 2 strikes. You'd rather put a ball in play. Some of the deltas with the 2-strike chase and the overall chase kind of are meaningful, in my view, at identifying who is actually patient, has strike zone feel, and who is passive. And I do think with Emmanuel Rodriguez, I think he's going to be good. There's just too much power on contact. He's such a good defensive player. But there are problems, and again, Trent Grisham is a great comp here because he's patient too. There's power on contact, not as much as Emmanuel Rodriguez has. But he's definitely in that mix, that player type where if you're looking at like the spider web, graph, the sliders are sort of in the same places for those guys, except Manny Rodriguez's are kind of turned up on 10. But yeah, 56% hard hit rate for a guy who's a plus defensive center fielder. I'll take that guy, even knowing that
there's some flaws.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing I feel like I've learned is when the stuff the guy does well is stuff you care about and it's like high end. When it is like 7 power, like you just go sort the FanGraphs leaderboard in inverse order of contact rate. Like the bottom 15 guys are Aaron Judge is in there and Shohei is in there and Julio Rodriguez is in there. But when the other stuff you're doing is like 7 or 8 on the scale, especially if it's the power component, it makes me feel okay about guys like Manny Rodriguez, Samuel Basayo, where it's just like, this guy's a freak. He's performed at every level as a young for the level guy. He plays a position of value.
With Juan Brito, like I made some comps based on like just result stats, and the comps weren't exciting. It was a lot of guys who don't hit the ball hard, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't think Juan Brito hits the ball hard, and the Guardians don't seem to value that the same way I do in terms of hitting the crap out of the ball. What are some of these stats that you've come to appreciate over the years?
And it morphs a little bit every year because the sources that I'm drawing the data from can change. Like you don't want to, for the purposes of like protecting your sources, some of these stats are so specific to the team that it can sort of be like a skeleton key
like
for the team to identify,
or their bat path grade or whatever.
Right. So some of it is a little bit different year to year. I will say that like, in zone contact, overall chase, 2-strike chase. A thing that I had access to this year that I hadn't in the past was chase contact, which I think is an interesting like bat control proxy. It's an interesting thing I think to fold in, although there are some like anecdotal trends in my mind, like the guys with low ball swings, I feel like tend to have a better chase contact just because pitches that miss, chase pitches tend to live down. And so I think there's like a little bit of a selection bias there. And then, max exit and, EV 90 hard hit rates, and like barrel rates or a team's version of barrel rates. Sometimes contact.
Do you have these in a like comprehensive way? Do you have like high hard hit rates. God, I'm so jealous.
I don't have them like broken down by level. If the way Kylie and I pool this data and then chop it up, we will do like averages by age for some of this stuff, but not necessarily adjusted for level. Sometimes, although that wasn't the case this year, the spreadsheet that we source might have the level the player finished at, and you can then like filter by the minor league level and then collect the average for that level. But sometimes you get the Rays do this, the Padres do this. There are definitely teams. Bryce Eldridge, with the Giants is an example of this, where Bryce Eldridge went to AA for a week and then to AAA for a week. And so when you look at Bryce Eldridge's numbers, it says he's in AAA, but he amassed most of those stats in A-ball all year. And you have to know not to believe that, like you have to know that the stats came from A-ball. You manually adjust that this team is like trying to game like models made by people who aren't paying attention, I guess. But yeah, like average launch and contact depth, like some of the expected stats this year, like expected ISO, sometimes expected slug. Like across the big leagues and the minors, we have dating back to 2017 now, Kylie and I, there were like 2018, 2020, there were a couple years in that early window when we didn't have anything for one reason or another. And, Kylie was with the team or there was a pandemic or whatever it was. But yeah, working through now the last more than a half decade of TrackMan era with prospect analysis, at least at FanGraphs, you start to see like some of this stuff. Some of the metadata I wish I had was like the chase contact, but split by like what part of the zone. Like I'd like an above zone chase contact. I'd like a below zone, like an east and west.
You'd be almost like figuring out bat path from that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think this is the other like monkey touching the monolith moment was during the pandemic when Kevin Goldstein was, we were, Batman and Robin of prospect stuff at FanGraphs for a couple months. Kevin was just like, hey, we're not going to travel this year, so let's pump budget into video software program that can help us with this stuff. And the bat path piece of it really, for me, is a more visually identifiable thing. When you start to see like in a strike zone scatter plot where guys swing and miss locations and pitch types are versus like where the contact is, you can see like, okay, Matt Vierling, I see you, what you can do really well. And Justin Henry Malloy does that too.
Scoopy guys versus the flat guys. And
right. Yeah. So like, okay, Alan Roden, I see what you can do up here at the top of the strike zone. And then where your power kind of just goes away at the bottom of the zone, unless it's a breaking ball, it doesn't finish or whatever it is. And you can start to identify trends that way. And especially guys who have that hole up and away against fastballs, left-handed hitters who can't cover that pitch. There are a lot of those pitches in the big leagues, just like hard fastballs.
That's Brandon Moss. He said that's why his career ended, basically.
Very interesting guy, obviously, like high end of the launch angle spectrum, what's sustainable. Guys like Braden Taylor remind me a lot of Brandon Moss, the Ryan Schimpfs of the world. The super launch boys for sure. There are a lot of those guys. They're fun.
I gotta have, my dumb way of doing it is that I have kind of settled on like sort of 50% grounders, 50% flies, as like if you're worse on either end, then I get worried about you. And I think that's actually sort of a bat pathy thing, and it's dumb, and you can do much better than that. But like if somebody's looking at a lesser data set, you can get something. Like if Rich Schimpf was a 50% fly ball guy, and like Jose Bautista made it work, and Moss made it work for a while, but there's usually a hole somewhere if you're doing that.
No doubt, yeah. And that's the other thing for me. It's more like if I can't find precedent for what it is you're doing, that is when I take a step back at least and we'll reevaluate. So like a guy this year was Justin Crawford with the Phillies, who in a bunch of the statistical categories that we have talked about, he's excellent in, these contact and the power on contact.
He's like a 60% ground ball guy.
Right. There's just not anyone in the big leagues who is putting the ball on the ground that much and like is actually good. And so I still want to value him as a prospect. He's still a good prospect.
Where'd you land with him?
I have a 40 plus on him. The warning signs with him are similar to the ones with Zach Veen a couple years ago. And with Crawford, it's you put on the table him playing center field, and that needs work. And the chase rates are higher than you want them to be, and so that's scary. But the upside is still there. I still want to have a grade of value on him that indicates that there's that sort of upside, while also acknowledging that his present skill is more like an extra outfielder. So I have a 40 plus on him, that's what that's trying to communicate, basically.
Yeah. One thing that fascinates me, sorry, just really quickly, you were talking about Crawford, is one thing that fascinates me is like what things are innate and what things are improvable. And what have you found like that is more in the bucket of improvable and more in the bucket of innate and not improvable?
Well, some of you're sort of reverse engineering this just through pattern recognition of the teams who are able to coax unexpected stuff out of some of their guys. And so on the hitting side, I would have told you up until I wrote Alex Freeland's scouting report this year that like the contact piece of it is mostly innate, the hand-eye coordination stuff. And I still think that's mostly true. Hand-eye, pitch tracking, ball strike recognition. And I think there's some teams that are doing a better job at like gamifying their hitters' approach in the box, like making it sort of like a meta game where they want you to attack the pitches that you can damage, and they're improving guys approach that way. I think with some of what like Boston has done, where they're taking the Chase Madroths of the world and the Christian Campbells of the world,
bat speed, right?
They're finding a way, to just, even if it's just like, hey, swing really hard. I don't know what it is there.
Well, they're heavy on weighted bats.
Yeah, I think you can see some of the like the counterweighted knob stuff, but and the way the distribution of the bat is impacting how it traverses the zone. But yeah, I think that there are some teams, and then like with the Dodgers will take fast players and then try to layer strength onto them. So, not all these guys have worked out, but like Jake Vogel is a high school outfielder who they drafted, who was just fast. And Gavin Lux was a glove oriented high school prospect, which is hilarious now. And Kendall George is another speedy high school outfielder. When they traded for Zyhir Hope, he was a speed first over slot, like 11th round high school outfielder.
He had bigger hams than I thought he would. I was looking at his quads, man. Those were prodigious.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like if you think about the stuff that a pro organization can really do, that a high school weight room or a junior college weight room or whatever, like sports science and medicine and strength and conditioning are the things that should be core competencies of any of these organizations. Right. And so if that's the missing ingredient for whoever the player is, then theoretically it should be like what you can help them do. But like Alex Freeland, who wouldn't surprise me if is just the Dodgers everyday shortstop at some point this year, because like he can actually play that position. He had a 63% contact rate in 2023. This is a college prospect who was, a name in high school, but 63% contact rate in 2023 was like 78% in 2024. And you can see there have been changes to his swing. They're pretty subtle. It's just like there's not a leg kick there anymore. It's just a smaller toe tap. Nothing about his hands has seemingly changed. Just like very subtle change to his footwork.
That's a huge improvement, though.
Has made it, I could not believe it. And now we don't really know, was there an injury or blah, blah, blah. Like we don't know what maybe was at play before that was causing him to be bad enough that I had like an extra infielder grade on him and now think he's an everyday shortstop. But there's definitely some of the teams are for sure better at making hitters good in a way that is sustainable. And then there are some that are good at making them perform in a way that looks great in the minors and can inflate their prospect value, but isn't necessarily sustainable. And I think there are definitely teams who are just like, yeah, just pull everything that you can. And
the Guardians are like, everyone's a shortstop and everyone makes contact. Don't you want our players?
You can see it. The way it's manifesting more now is in the air pull percentages, and
our guys pull in the air. You want that?
Yes, you do. That is a thing that I've noticed, especially among some of my sources who are more, quantitative in their style and their
Twins
nature.
Seem to have that ethos.
Yeah, they've been running that for a while.
Yeah, the Twins. I would say the Twins, the Rays, the Blue Jays for sure. Davis Schneider's of the world. Like he's a great example of how over time you get found out, and this is how things trend. Tampa, Seattle.
When I watch Davis Schneider, I feel like I can see that all you want to do is hit it right there. Like I can see where you want to hit it. I see where you want the ball, and I see where you want to hit it. Yeah. And this is one of the other things where it's like, it is so hard to be good and then to stay good once the league has had a look at you. It's very difficult. So you end up with the James Outman type guys who, have their one big year and then they get found out, and then what's a stat
can
that
they
you think
adjust? Speaks
to that adjustability? Is that sort of contact and
man, I don't know. I think that so much of it has to do with what changes. It's like an aptitude thing more than it is in the data. I would guess like I would bet on the guys who make contact to do it more just because of the players who we see having a long tail to their career, like the Howie Kendrick, Asdrubal Cabrera type guys tend to be the ones who have that skill. I think even just putting the ball in play a lot gives Adam Frazier a chance to have like a good BABIP driven year in his early to mid 30s. Whereas like the Franmil Reyes type guys kind of don't. You go to Japan.
Yeah, you see that. Yeah, the end point is getting non-tendered before you reach free agency, sometimes going to play overseas, and then the contact-oriented guys play into their mid-30s. You're like, how's this guy still getting opportunities? Well, defensive value and then just putting the ball in play. You mentioned Zyhir Hope a little earlier, and I know you're not on Bluesky, but I think there was some feedback about your ranking of Zyhir Hope when the top 100 dropped this week. What did you see this year? What gives you some reservations about some of the more aggressive rankings that are out there on Hope this year?
Yeah, it can be frustrating. Like for sure, I had a prospect chat after the 100 dropped and heard a lot of the same thoughts that I'm sure were out there. I don't know why the internet allows expectations for prospects to be like, it feels like the feedback I get from readers is like, why aren't you beholden to these expectations? Whereas like the conceited part of me is like, why am I not the one setting the expectations?
Yeah, why is everybody else not wrong?
It's right. Especially when it comes to like saying, hey, hold like your horses on this player.
He's a 17-year-old. It's like, what is he, like 18, 19? He's like a teenager in A-ball. Like, isn't this the thing that we always hit ourselves? Like Hedbert Perez and like, yes. I mean, there's a million guys who
Hedbert's a great example. Yeah. Hedbert's a great example where I was just like, hey, this is like a bad defensive left fielder who I'm not buying can actually hit. This is like, if there's a thing that readers should key into on my stuff, it's when I say, hey, like pump the brakes on this dude. And I'm not always right about that. Like I had Colton Cowser outside the top 100 last year after he was in, I was high on him before the draft relative to everybody else. And then I was just like, hey, this guy's striking out a lot and doesn't have enough power to be a left fielder. And then he came to camp last year, like clearly much stronger. And with enough power to support like having a 30% strikeout rate. But with Hope specifically, I just think it's too small a sample to care about the data in a big way. And his data is impressive. And I have it here and I'll read some of it off to you. So the big league average at some of these statistics in the corner outfield are an 81% zone contact, a 73% contact rate, with like a 104.5 EV90 and a 41% hard hit rate. And Zyhir Hope is clearing the bar across the board there. He's got an 86% zone contact, a 76% contact, a 109 EV90, and a 45% hard hit rate. And yeah, this is a physically mature left fielder who at age 20, you mentioned, Eno, how big this guy is. Folks can go, search here on YouTube, like Zyhir Hope FanGraphs. I've got video from the fall league up. He's maxed out for me. I don't know what's going to happen with him physically as he ages into his mid to late 20s.
Yeah, you're not dreaming on the body, getting anywhere. I think it is. That's what I was surprised about when I saw him. I was like, oh, this guy's, it's either going to happen or it's not. We're not saying, when he fills out, he's filled out.
Right. And then, it's a 24% strikeout rate guy at low A, which already should be hey, let's take a step back from this before we go all in type of data point. And then watching Hope for 6 weeks in the fall league, he just has some of the tenets of a guy whose hit tool I'm skeptical of. His head's flying around. He has that vulnerable. The fastball is riding up and away from him, which like every big league righty has. And for, I just want to see it across a bigger sample, number one, and against better pitching, number two. Like if I were to read you guys, here's another prospect. He'll go nameless. Let's see if you can identify who this is. This was a guy's 2023 season. This is a guy's 2023 season, okay? He's 21 years old, and the numbers that he posted, again, it was a pretty small sample because of injury, same as Hope, but it was even more, it was a bigger sample. I want to say it was like close to a 300 plate appearance sample that occurred mostly at AA. Let me look and confirm. Yes, okay, 300 plate appearances, most of which were accrued at AA. He's 21 years old. He has an 85% in-zone contact rate, a 76% overall contact rate, a 105 EV90. He had maxed out at 113, a 19% barrel rate. Okay. His X slug from this year was 480, and he's a maybe shortstop who did this at AA. Can you guess who this guy is?
Maybe shortstop from AA.
He's a maybe shortstop who did this at AA.
I got a guess.
Who's your guess?
Is that Blaze Jordan?
No, it is Colson Montgomery.
Okay.
It's Colson Montgomery who's, strikeout rate exploded this year, who, this data is amazing from 2023. We all got tricked, myself included. Kylie had Colson number one overall in baseball midseason 2023, in part because of buying into this data. Okay. And it just was faulty. It's just not a big enough sample to really care about, especially when the guys you're facing, when your problem is fastball and you're at low A and guys sit 90, like you haven't been exposed yet. And so I'm just not ready to say about Zyhir Hope, who I have a 45 plus on, like that's the tier right behind the 100. I just think this is a platoon corner guy with upside above that I'm not ready to buy enough to stuff him in there. And there have been too many times during my, career, I guess is the word to use at this point, doing this, where either I've been like peer pressured or, internet pressured.
Or whatever. This happens in my rankings. It's like, but the ADP or like the general consensus, and like, do I just have to keep them high-ish just to appease the masses? Or do or just tank them all the way and just put them where
take a stand. Yeah. Don't get in. Don't get in.
The phrase that I have used is to try to be directionally correct, at least, so that I'm not the guy ending up with Miguel Vargas, because the physical tools, when you watch him, it's just like, this guy's not that good, when the world that we're living in is there's Aaron Judge, there's Ellie De La Cruz, there's Shohei Ohtani, there's, what I mean? Like, there are just clearly players who don't check that visual box. And sometimes that's identifying that there's an issue with what's happening with their swing that's going to be exposed that just hasn't yet. And even if that just means pumping the brakes, like the grade I have on Zyhir Hope is like a top 10 draft picks grade. It's not a bad grade, but I do think that it's more red flaggy to have watched him for 6 weeks in fall leagues, to swing and miss as much as he did there. I was not ready to do whatever, I don't know what the range of the pubs is. I'm sure it's already on BREF, but let's find out. But yeah, I just wasn't.
BP had him pretty high.
Right. And like, there have been times when, wow, okay, yeah, that is really high. Like pipelines and BAs, that's okay. Like if you want to bet that it's real, then okay. For, him to be top 10, you're saying like this guy's also a center fielder and, but yeah, it'll be fascinating to see who's right about this one. But I just got tired of like having an opinion that wasn't like being wrong because I didn't stick to my guns. Felt way worse than being wrong when I did. And so now I'm just sort of like, I'm done with that now.
Yeah, it's like my Jordan Montgomery ranking last year. I was like, well, everyone thinks he's a good pitcher, and he did just get real money from a real team. So I'll put. I was directionally correct. I had him like 59th or something.
You would never end up with him in the draft.
I would never end up with the draft. So I was like, okay, so like I did tell you guys not to draft him, but I could have just not put him 80 or 100. Like I could have put him like It didn't matter to me where I put it. Like I was just like, need to put him somewhere. So here, I guess.
I think the conversation about Zyhir Hope is fascinating because A, I love that you're sticking to your guns, and B, there are reasons to point out red flags when they exist. Jesus Mate is getting attention. I think it's kind of unlike anything I've really seen from someone who's only played in the Dominican Summer League. Right? This is pretty massive hype. So what's different? What gives you more faith in someone like Mate who hasn't played stateside yet, given that, we're talking about a guy that won't even turn 18 until May?
Yeah, some of it is just the position value part of it, where Mate has a chance to play shortstop or be a very good second baseman. I have him stacked in the 100 along with some of those other middle infielders who in a bad draft year go 1-1-ish or are in the mix for that type of thing. And I do think, especially with the teenage hitters in pro ball, using the draft as a filter for your thoughts is very useful to think like, okay, well,
if he was in the draft this year, where would he go?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Like we're seeing all these high schoolers. You spent all last summer seeing the best high schoolers in the country again. You've got like, a 10 or 15 year Rolodex of seeing these guys. Does this fit physically first, before you even look at the data? Does this guy's physical tools fit in that group where you could see him going in the top 5 of a draft? And with Mate, I think, I think the body and swing comp that feels appropriate for him is like Cano. That's where, like, if you told me he was too boxy at physical maturity to play shortstop, I'd believe you, but it's just such a beautiful looking swing. And the video in the DSL guys, it's out there. It's on YouTube. There are teams who stream their DSL games. Some of the streams are better than others. They have the little TrackMan, readout sitting right there, so you can see the pitch velo and movement exit velo in some of them.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. And then with Made, that's one where when you're gonna put a 17-year-old DSL guy on your top 100, for someone like me, like I'm texting my sources and I'm just like, hey, whatever video you have of this guy from the DSL, can you just like send me 10 swings? And so you end up with like watching 30 or 40 swings of this guy from different camera angles from having done that. And you could go, okay, like I buy that this is a really talented guy. I had a previous, amateur report on him. So he was someone people cared about before he was in pro ball at all. And then you dive into the data, and his data is crazy, like really crazy. And obviously it's DSL data, and the quality of the pitching down there is god awful. And so you have to, take it with a pillar of salt, but it is nuts. So I can recite some of that stuff off to you guys as well, because it is just like, good thing I sorted these alphabetically. So yeah, 17.5 He had a 90% in zone contact rate and an 89% contact rate overall. The fact that the gap between those two is not bigger should tells you more about DSL pitching than anything else, right?
Oh, right, okay. But he can also go get it wherever it is, I guess.
Right. 15% chase. Again, that's amazing, but he also a 104 EV90 on a 17-and-a-half-year-old and a 47% hard hit rate. When I do believe like hard in, hard out is a thing. And when you're facing kids who are throwing 87, for you to have a 47% hard hit rate, that's amazing. So there are definitely
the science on that's really kind of interesting. Exit velocity is 4/5 batter and 1/5 pitcher is something that Rob Arthur found. And so you can read that and be like, oh, it's all batter. It's not. It's still 1/5 pitcher. So it's like that's actually going to be meaningful when you're comparing guys. Right.
So there are deciding when to stick your neck out for somebody like this. I will tend to pick my spots because I thought Kevin Maitan was going to be great. We weren't using data like this to help reinforce opinions like that at the time, but I'd rather not, so I have like a 50 on Jesus Made. I think you could reasonably rank him anywhere between like 40 and 100 and make a coherent argument for why he belongs there because like the grades are more important than the ordinal rankings and the way the tiers of talent sort of split, after a certain point, like it's a big fat hunkin' tier of guys who are a mix of like risk and upside.
40. I mean, it's
right. So
different ways.
But yeah, this guy and Alfredo Duno, the Reds catcher, are the two guys where I was just like, yeah, here you go, guillotine me. I don't care. I'm all in on both of these guys for somewhat different reasons. Like Alfredo Duno is just a freak tool shed catcher who has unbelievable power and speed. He's been hurt. He hasn't really played. His power data is amazing. The contact data is not, but like he hasn't really played. Like it's a smaller sample. So, they pushed him over complex ball to low A. He was 18 in full season ball last year and then got hurt and blah, blah, blah. But like, these two guys are the two teenage hitters on the list where it's just like the ceiling on these two guys over the next 2 or 3 years is have a chance to be the best, couple of prospects in baseball. Whereas some of the more stable Luke Keishels of the world and, the Juan Britos of the world. It's more about floor and proximity than it is about their ceiling.
Yeah. One of Brito's comps was G1 Bay. And I was like, okay, he's a guy who can play maybe some be okay.
A lot of what our listeners like are the next wave guys, the guys that haven't popped on the list yet. You write a lot about them. It's the picks to click. You write that every year. So it's the search for the next wave of top 100 prospects. So broad question here. Who are some of your favorites from this year's picks to click collection? The guys that could take massive leaps here in 2025.
There's a hummingbird nesting right here, and I wish I could show you guys. So I guess I'll pick a guy from each category. So it is helpful to like bucket these guys because they do sort of pop from these buckets. And one of them is like, in the past, I've referred to it as like black box pitching, where they're the Walker Buehler types where you had TJ and you've kind of been gone for a year and whatever has been going on there, you come out the other side and it's very good. And so with Buehler, he had a massive velocity spike and Brady Smith is my Dodgers guy like that this year where I like Brady Smith a lot at the 2023 combine as a medium-sized high school pitcher whose fastball had the traits you like and who had good secondary stuff but just wasn't throwing all that hard. And now coming out of TJ, it wouldn't surprise me if just because of the physical maturation and what you're doing with weightlifting and sort of nothing else during your rehab process, that it wouldn't surprise me if Brady Smith pops. So he's one of the young pitchers who I think has a chance. Then there's like the overt physical tool. This is what they look like group where it's like, of course this guy's good. He's built like Larry Fitzgerald and, has made progress in a baseball skills way. Connor Griffin with the Pirates, he's a hit tool risk high school prospect from last year's draft. He's tooled up. It is unbelievable, like how physical, how fast, how much power. It's just, can he hit or not? And if he comes out this year and looks fine in that regard, then he's gonna move on to the top 100. Just the tools are too big, the upside is too big. If he reinforces it with any kind of like pro performance data at all by like July, he'll need to move in just on the basis of what his upside is. Connor Griffin, other guys like this. But then there's the sneaky pitchers group. Matt Wilkinson is my favorite of this group. The more I do this, the more I value proximity, durability. How many innings have you thrown? You're on the 40-man for my pitchers. And Matt Wilkinson with the Guardians is, I think, by the end of next year, we'll have approached that. He's a super fat guy. You have to really look past how husky he is and see that this is a really athletic guy. His delivery is beautiful and fluid, and he's powering so far down the mound. His shin is like scraping the mound almost because of how low to the ground he is. And I just love what that does for his fastball plane. He commands it, and you think for a guy who sits 91 to have a fastball that plays like his does. I've learned enough about the Joe Ryans of the world now to be like, be on these guys, Eric. They command it. And so Matt Wilkinson from the Guardians is my pitcher of that sort for next year. And then the developmental tweak guys where all the physical tools are there. And it's just about like, does this swing work? We don't know. Can there be a change made to this guy's swing or approach? And I mentioned one of these guys on a different podcast this week, and so I'll spread it out. Justin Crawford is in this group on the list. Denzel Clark with the A's. Denzel Clark, his parents were Olympians, and he's one of the best defensive outfielders in minor league baseball. His swing is so long. He's just one of those like super long 6'4", 6'5" guys that if you told me he shortened up in his mid to late 20s, and I would tell you, okay, well, he's going to be one of the best defensive outfielders and have like a 25 or 30 home run season or two in there. And when that will occur for him, we just don't know. But I bet you it will take him having to make adjustments against big league pitching for a little while before it happens. But you want to be sensitive.
Because he'll just mash in the minors or something?
Well, I mean, he's one where it has been mixed, but he's had K rates in the 30% area and still been like a 120, 130 WRC plus guy because of how much power there is. But it's just, I have a 30 on his hit tool because I do think he'll be a 30% strikeout rate guy during the arc of his pre-free agency years. But he's just a swing adjustment away from doing basically everything, and he already kind of does everything else but hit. I think those are most of the guys. There are a couple other, categories here where it's like, the low level. Demetrio Casantes with the Diamondbacks performed on the complex and in the Cal League, and Zyhir Hope performed in the Cal League, and I just want to see those guys keep hitting against better pitching than they have. And then for the first time this year, I've got like 2-year dart throws. There's David Matoma from the Pirates who, baseball in Africa is becoming a thing. And David Matoma is a 19-year-old from Uganda who throws 100. And so what's going to happen with him? Like, I don't know, but I bet you 2 years from now, we're going to think it's good. And then my other like absolutely, crazy pick from this group is a guy named Yohanfer Santana with the Marlins, who had Tommy John last year. He made 3 starts and then blew out. He's 19. He's 6'7", and was like already in the mid to upper 90s. And it's just one of those where, are you Yuri Perez? Do I know you? Are you Yuri Perez? He's in that vein where it's just like, this guy is freaky. And so I just want to be on him because I've only seen a handful of guys like this in my whole life, and he might not ever throw strikes, but it's still true that like I've just not seen perfect, like statuesque, perfectly put together Like just scale Sandy Alcantara up to 6'7", and like that's what this guy is put together like. And I absolutely want to bet, on a guy like that succeeding over time. And like those are my 2-year dart throws who are just like, yeah, for 2 years from now, here are the names who are like fun and interesting to follow.
Yeah, for the deep dynasty folks out there, I mean, we're in a league called Devil's Rejects, and it's completely open player pool, and you got to be 2+ years ahead to seemingly get a massive edge on players like that. I wanted to ask you about the White Sox. We were doing team previews earlier in the week, and I think we gave the White Sox about 4 minutes, and most teams get like 15. And the big question is really, is this rebuilding effort on track? Through the trades they're making, are they amassing the talent they should be? Are they actually putting enough together? And do they have a coaching staff, a player development machine built for that group to actually maximize the talent in a way where they will make good on this long-term rebuild? Because I think there's this belief that rebuilds always work, but you also have to have the right pieces to turn A-ball and AA guys into actual high-quality big leaguers. Yeah,
I think I would say it's mixed positive and trending more positive like across the more recent trades. Like the Cease trade, I did not love, and it seemed like his market that go round and again now is just a little less robust than I would have guessed. I think whenever like all these rebuilds, they kind of have different component parts. There's the trading your big leaguers for prospects. Is pro scouting helping you in that way? There's the drafting part of it. There's the development part of it. And then there's the international scouting part of it. And with the White Sox, when you trade a guy like Dylan Cease or anybody who's an established big league star, I feel like you have to get everyday hitter, at least one, back in that deal. And that deal was so built on pitching, which is a thing that you should be mostly developing. Like the teams who sustain success are the ones who have pitching depth that they have developed. You don't get boxed into a corner from injuries that way. You're not costing yourself assets to acquire guys who are like fringe pitching staff types because you just need depth because you've developed it. And that has been a problem in Chicago. I don't mind using a high draft pick on Hagen Smith because I think Hagen Smith's really good. I don't mind using a high draft pick on Noah Schultz because I think Noah Schultz is, he's got issues, but he's freaky in a way that if he does hit, the White Sox really don't have an opportunity to acquire players like this. And some of that is because of the state of the franchise. Some of that is like Jerry Reinsdorf's fault. But yeah, like a very pitching centric approach to the rebuild initially that I think has been more corrected with the Crochet trade. Are there like super duper all-star types here right now? Probably not. Like the guys who they've mostly acquired, I think are good, solid, average, everyday player types, like a Kyle Teal, like an Edgar Cuero. I think Braden Montgomery, who they got in the Crochet deal, the Red Sox first round pick from Texas A&M, has that sort of upside to be a star player. It's just about how does he look coming off of a severe injury that he suffered at the end of last college season? Is the hit tool improvement that he showed as a junior at A&M real? There were a lot of strikeouts there at Stanford before he transferred. But Chase Madroth, they got as like a secondary or tertiary piece in that deal. I have like more of a role player grade on him, but there are definitely people in baseball who really like Chase Madroth and think that he could be like an everyday piece. And so they've started to accumulate a depth of these types of pieces via the pro scouting part of it. The star players have got to come from the draft. They've got to come from international scouting. And the international scouting part of this has been a real problem for the White Sox. The White Sox have tended to do the aftermarket thing where all these teams are like, here you go, Dominican player, $3 million agreement. Here you go, Venezuelan player, $2 million agreement. And the White Sox sit that stuff out for the most part. And they say, okay, Cuban guys who enter the market late, we're on you. And that sometimes it works. And that's how you end up with Luis Robert.
It's also
and that's how you
Oscar Colas.
Correctamundo, buddy. Like that's exactly it. Like, there are so many of these. Norge Vera is another one where, when this is the market you're playing in, you're just sort of subject to whatever the quality of the players are coming out of that market in a given year. And it's highly variable. And you don't have Jose Abreu around anymore to help you recruit these guys. And so their approach internationally has to change. But the problem with that is that takes forever, not just because the players you're signing from that market take forever, but because the market for those players, it's already settled 2-3 years in advance. And
it's so friendship based. So you actually have to hire people that have those friendships in place. Like you have to kind of buy your way in, and you can't just be like, can just show up in Dominican and be like, "Hi guys, I'm here to get all the good players."
And you have to, when relationships are part of how you succeed in those spaces, and the Padres have established relationships with all of these players and their trainers, and the Rangers have established, relationships, and the Yankees have the pinstripes on, and the Dodgers have, you are at a disadvantage when you have not been swimming in those waters for most of the last decade plus.
Have the Orioles caught up on that? Because the Orioles were out, and are they caught up a little bit? Have they managed to do the work?
Yes, I think you're at the point where they have interesting guys coming through. And then you're approaching that market. Teams might love to play in that market, but their approaches are widely different. Like Cleveland is a spread out 6-figure bonuses to a lot of guys team. Whereas the Braves are give one guy $4 million. And then the rest of our class is go look at the Braves complex level hitters stats from last year. There's one guy who slugged 400 because they give one guy in the international market $4 million. And then the rest are, 10, 20 grand. And so you end up with one good player. If he's good, you're putting all your eggs in one 17-year-old basket. And so it's just this is the area where the White Sox, it's just going to take so long, even if they could be motivated. And I've asked Chris Getz about this at the GM meetings two meetings ago. Is your approach going to change in this market? And he said, yes. But the truth is that even if that's true, if your motivation is instantaneous, you still we're not going to see any results from that in who you sign until 3 years from now. And then any results from who of those players are actually good until probably 3-4 years after that. And so it's a real problem. And it's some of the same stuff on the data infrastructure side where.
Yeah, they have real problems with data. They're so weird about it's not good. They have
I just think the stuff Jerry Reinsdorf cares to invest in. And he's, I have nice things to say about Jerry Reinsdorf too. He's an amazingly loyal person. I think that some of the people who he's kept in that org for a long time, they're amazing at their jobs. Joe Butler is an amazing scout. And, I know there are stories about Jerry Reinsdorf. I know a homeless guy who Jerry Reinsdorf has helped multiple times. The guy who signed Mike Cameron, his area scout is a homeless guy now. And Jerry's, made sure that guy's had a place to live. Gene Watson, same thing, amazing person. But yeah, it's so hard to catch up when teams in your division, like Cleveland, have had, they've understood kinematic sequencing because of cameras they've put in their big league park, and they have a decade and a half head start on you. Good luck. You have to have all the data infrastructure installed.
I hear player development problems here. Yeah. I hear massive player development problems, and the stuff that I heard that was 2-3 years ago was so bad that even if they've cleaned up what I heard 2 or 3 years ago, they're still behind.
You can be good still. The Padres aren't great at developing players, but they're sure good at picking them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, A
really
for scouting, even if it's a C or C- for actual development, right? And then maybe there's good enough to trade them. So that works.
DVR, in the rundown. Before the episode, you mentioned the Pirates and developing hitters, and how Henry Davis has been underwhelming. And some of that is just the draft class quality. You go look at that draft class and you're scrolling and you're just okay, who would you take first if not Mickey Moniak, like who are you really going to take first in this draft? AJ Puck, like no. Nick Senzel, like no. And then the Henry Davis draft.
If you re-racked it, Henry Davis wouldn't be that far from first.
I don't know if
there's a good draft.
That's the thing. It's like that's Jackson Merrill draft. Like that's Jackson Merrill went at the back of the first round. Could you realistically say, hey, Pirates, why didn't you take Jackson Merrill? Probably not, but
there was no consensus that he would be a 1-1 guy.
But the Padres had him about that high. Like the Padres had him 2 or 3. They had him ahead of Marcelo Meyer on their draft board that year.
Hey,
because
that's what you need, right? You gotta stick with what you believe.
But the reason we wanted to bring up the Pirates in particular is we were surprised to find that they are number 1 in bat speed. They're number 1 in bat speed at the major league level last year. Now, they're number 1 in bat speed. That did lead to good blasts. And in fact, they were underrated in barrels. I think they might have been top 10 in barrels. So they do hit the ball hard. The park, I think, obscures some of that. And then they were bottom 5 in square up percentage, which I have yet to sort of figure out how much I believe in it. It feels a little bit too much like line drive percentage, which can be really kind of wonky year to year. But there is maybe like strengths and weaknesses kind of coming out, which may be that they swing the bat hard, they hit the ball hard, but maybe they're not lining it up well. And then the prospects you brought up sort of sounded a little like you're talking about, Connor Griffin here. And it's like, okay, this guy sounds like a guy who swings the bat hard, hits the ball hard, and maybe doesn't line it up every time. So I wonder if that's a commonality you saw in the Pirates organization. And also just sort of in a larger sense, like how much you worry about player development and like, I guess, how right you'll look if you pick a guy who's in a good player development versus a guy who's not.
Yeah, the predicting versus scouting, right?
Yeah.
Where the second a guy gets traded, the second Nick Nastrini gets traded from the Dodgers to the White Sox, am I supposed to like downgrade what I think of him now, right? Like, so yeah, that is a challenging thing. As far as the Pirates are concerned, yeah, I think that clearly that they have a type. You can see some of it internationally. They have a kid named Yordani De Los Santos in the low minors too, where he's got unbelievable bat speed. Tony Blanco is another one, 6'7" corner outfielder, ridiculous power. If we sorted the leaderboards across all of pro baseball by like hard hit rate, he's going to be right at the very top with Judge and Ohtani, Tony Blanco. Some of the hitter development stuff especially is so obscured. Like the knowledge has not permeated. I don't think the industry as a whole, how to do some of whether it's working with VR or some of the high tech, pitching machines so that you can just take unlimited reps against Jake DeGrom or whatever it is. And then, I look at Bob Nutting and I don't know whether Bob Nutting can be convinced to like invest in that sort of tech, but I don't know. Some of my biases are here I am in Tempe, Arizona. I can ride my bike to the Angels complex. I could ride my bike to the A's and Giants complexes. So I see their stuff, I see the cameras being put in at the A's complex and the boxes from the Hawkeye, just empty cardboard boxes that just like say Hawkeye on them and stuff. And it was like, all right, well, maybe you guys want to, I'm just like taking pictures and sending them to my friends. Like, hey, look at this. Please let me go on your complexes still. With the teams in Florida, it's more difficult because I'm not there a couple hundred times every year. So with the Pirates specifically, maybe an overemphasis on bat speed and less about like how that can maybe be developed. There are certain guys where what they're doing with their body as they swing seems so athletic and innate in a way that it seems unteachable. Like peak Javi Baez, can you really teach anybody to swing? Like Juan Soto, when you see Juan Soto's bat finish in the dirt behind him like that, and it's just like his whole swing is over in the blink of an eye, and he's rotated like the head of an owl, like completely around in the blink of an eye. Like, can you really teach anybody to do that? Like, probably not. And so there's a certain point where that's the sort of stuff I would be interested in targeting is like, yeah, let's trade for O'Neal Cruz because, oh my God. And then at a certain point, like I was all over Brian Hayes thinking that the power would arrive, like actual in-game power would arrive, and it just didn't. You know, I was just like, oh, this guy will be Matt Chapman, but it didn't. So some of that stuff, those are answers that I don't quite have. Is
do you like Termar? Did you like the trade for Nick York? What do you think of their minor league system just generally?
So Termar, I liked Termar in high school, and he just sort of hasn't done anything. Like he just hasn't gotten any better.
Sort of speaks to what you're talking about. I mean, it hasn't, you know.
Yeah, he still has power. I saw Termar, you know, last fall a lot, and there are times when his hands are still in the right spot to put a charge into the baseball, but overall he just seems imbalanced in the box, and you know, he hasn't gotten any better on defense. And yeah, he was a tough exclude from the 100 because I just really love Termar as like a person. He's just such an amazing, like seeming young guy. But Nick York, so Nick York's going to be a weird one. Go look at Nick York's splits. Nick York has crazy weird reverse splits. He's one where when you look visually, like, let's just watch this guy face lefties, just swing against lefties over and over and over again. And you just cannot believe how the angle of his bat just does not, it just cannot deal with lefty fastballs kind of coming in at him this way. And so his reverse splits are totally bizarre. That was a very interesting challenge trade, Quinn Priester for Nick York. It was almost certainly need based, but you'll see like whatever Boston does with Quinn Priester, they're amazing at developing guys. And so it wouldn't surprise me if like Quinn Priester levels up. Whereas Nick York just seems like an okay guy who the Pirates need a player like that to like just be an okay hitter. But he's so strange that
you're saying that he has a really strange bat path, and there's nothing from the sort of ground ball fly ball mix that makes it obvious. I mean, the reverse platoon splits would, but
yeah.
I 40%
put on the
grounders, 30% fly balls. Like, yeah, there's a lot of guys like that.
I put on sometimes like the bat path stuff, especially when it's a bizarre outlier guy, can be hard to describe visually. I know so much of our readership doesn't sit and watch these guys, even if you've got MLB TV. If it's a Wednesday night and it's like Framber Valdez is facing Corbin Burns, like, are you going to watch that, or are you going to watch Indianapolis and Toledo? So, and I'm sympathetic to that, but like that's why we have the 2 TV set up at the house. But so I'm trying to describe visually what's going on with as much of these guys as you possibly can. And Nick York is one of those where it's just so strange that it is difficult to do. But yeah, like Nick York is inside outing pitches from righties that are like down and in. He's pulling the occasional hanging breaking ball that is like up around his hands, and he's struggling with like elevated fastballs against righties. He is like a pretty classic inside out hitter. It's just so strange who it's happening against. And then against lefties, you know, he's a 75% contact rate guy where he's, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just so strange. Like there's not really a whole lot of
really weird draft pick when he happened, right? Like
he was, and some of that was pandemic related, but he was. I saw York in high school and thought that he was like a fine second or third round type of like second base contact, not big tools. But like in retrospect, for the Red Sox to take a guy like that makes total sense considering all the other guys who they've targeted and had success with, like the Christian Campbells of the world. Where you just have Mikey Romero. Yeah. These are like the Red Sox draft picks where it's like, oh, you like the polished hit tool guys. Okay. Me too. So yeah, simpatico with them and Cleveland and Milwaukee and the Rays and on a lot of that stuff. But yeah, Nick York's a really weird one. Pittsburgh, it's going to be fascinating to see. Obviously there's some connective tissue with Charrington and some other orgs who we would describe as being successful at some of this stuff. But yeah, my hope is that Pittsburgh is good soon, if only for like some of my family members who went to college out there and care about the Pirates.
Yeah, it's a great fan base, great ballpark. They deserve better. They deserve some runs into October.
They got the pitchers. They need some hitters. Some of these hitters need to work out.
I got a little excited a couple minutes ago. You were going to explain why the Padres had Jackson Merrill ahead of Marcelo Meyer a few drafts ago. What was the reason for that?
They just liked him more. They just thought he was more talented. Like it's the Padres. They just believed in him more as a hitter, and Marcelo who was in their backyard, San Diego area high schooler. Marcelo had a lot of profile very early because Keone Cavaco was an upperclassman when Marcelo was a sophomore and a junior.
So people had been seeing him for a while.
So I saw, there's Keone Cavaco, who was one of those like classically overvalued by the models because he was 17 and a half on draft day. But yeah, like the Padres just pick, it's, the opposite of trust the process. And it's just like trust AJ Preller and Chris Kemp and Logan White and David Post, like trust that those guys know what a good baseball player looks like. And they do pretty well. Like as some of the other teams, as more of the teams gravitate toward a specific couple types of approaches and are competing for the same types of players, while you don't, like there is a game theory element, I think, that helps explain their success and Washington's success with some of, what looks like their rebuild, with some of the guys that they've gotten in some of their trades. Not that these teams are totally ignoring data, but I just think
they did that amazing on the Soto trade at first back then. I'm happy to be wrong. I just thought I look at James Wood and was like, I don't know, too many strikeouts at his like already at that level. Like he's striking out that much in the minors. And then I looked at Abrams and I was like, I don't know if he's a great shortstop. And, and I just saw all the flaws. And now you look up and you're like, well, they have a starting shortstop. James Wood is probably one of the most exciting young players that's about to enter into the lexicon this year. He's like, has some similarities to Ellie, right? He's like tall and runs like a gazelle and hits piss missiles, So it's like, oh, and you guys did pretty good. Oh, and you got Gore too. Like it's like, oh, okay, that was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and you can see some of it in, Rizzo's the free agents that he is on, and even like Keibert Ruiz. Like Keibert's been disappointing, but you can see why. A catcher with like an 11% strikeout rate, like that's freaky. So that's like
why the Diamondbacks wanted Moreno. It's like, yeah, he's.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh my god.
And if this is Reese is the worst if Reese is this is the worst that works out, it's still a major league catcher, and they got better up the middle. And yeah, sure, maybe Hassel didn't work out, but they did pretty well.
Yeah.
And Scherzer is one of the best free agent deals of all time.
Yeah, like. I think Rizzo's ability to pick his spots and know like Jordan Zimmerman, bye, and who to retain and who to like piece together to be the role players around your stars. I, as analytically inclined as I am, and like my baseball fandom and sports obsession was seasoned by that when I was a teenager, because Moneyball came out when I was just like a sophomore in high school. By my junior year, I read it. I'm not a trust the process guy. I think Sam Hinkie has more in common with Sam Bankman-Fried than he does with, Ozzie Newsome or Pat Gillick or, Jerry West. Like, to me, there are definitely people in sports executives who have come to an understanding with ownership about job security, and the game they're playing is one about job security and not necessarily about winning as a means to job security. And I think that's part of how we end up with like, hey, at this payroll number, we're going to win like 86 games.
Yeah, 86 games. Yeah, I was thinking that. I was thinking Seattle.
Trust us right. That's a good example. Like, trust me to make us have our process at this budgetary number will put us in the 84 win area, and our people will help make it be 86, 88 wins. And then once you're in the playoffs, it's just a crapshoot anyway. But when the Padres are like, hey, let's get freaks. And then it's your team, your 84 win team of, Juan Britos. And over there is Manny Machado. And over there is Xander Bogaerts. And there's Tatis.
It's so funny that they actually share a complex. They couldn't be more different in a lot of ways.
Good luck with that. But yeah, then you get overzealous where, the Padres, do you think that they feel the Soto trade was worth it. Like they were literally cracking champagne on the complex and were confident enough in it to like tell the media that that's what they were doing. And I just think that, I mean, it's hindsight's 2020, but like you'd rather have CJ Abrams if he weren't at the casino all night, and James Wood and all these guys like,
and
like rather than Jason Hayward and
Bogarts signing is just awful. I mean, that's going to really hurt them.
Yeah, so it is tough. Like you paint yourself into this corner but also like your owner's dying, and so there are all kinds of other stuff. But yeah, sometimes it's just like some of this is because I lived through Jahlil Okafor, and you know what I mean. Like I just don't think that it's good enough to be like, what if we're bad enough long enough that I can goof 3 times? It's like, no, you can't take Markelle Fultz and live to tell the tale. I know that Hinkie didn't take Fultz, but you can't. And it's not like the Grizzlies don't apply.
Philly doesn't have anything to show for trust the process, really. I mean, they have Embiid, but they haven't won with him.
But yeah, like, the Grizzlies are clearly analytically inclined because they're just like, let's take, Desmond Bane isn't long at all. He's like a short little, he's built like Doug Martin, and he's older, but we don't care.
They're actually
Xavier Tillman, we don't care.
And I think they're a player development team too, where like they take these guys and you don't know who they are, and then they play to the top of their ability. Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, like I'm surprised they don't do more packaging and trading, but they don't want to get too expensive, I think. So they're just like,
right,
we're okay.
Yeah,
I have
wondered
12
if they would
good
do
guys. They all play amazing defense and can hit threes. And
yeah, they basically like salary dumped Marcus Smart and had enough like ammo to be able to do that without the team getting meaningfully worse. Like,
but also didn't add. They're like
right. I know. I was kind of bummed. I wondered if they had known about. If they had known about Luka, if they would have been like, how about Ja for Luka? I hate Luka, so I would not have wanted that to happen. But like, I mean, he's great, but I just still want to root for that guy. Just just not my flavor of athlete to like be like, yeah, go Luka. What's that?
The whining?
Yeah. He just seems like a petulant guy. Just not my style. I like the stoic, like, But
Steph Curry, I'm a little bit more Steph Curry.
Yeah, like I do. I'm trying to think of who are my like NBA dudes who I like really ride for. I mean, I love the Thompson twins. That's what's been on to the house a lot is the Rockets, the Grizzlies, OKC. Like I love the vibe of the OKC group. They all seem to really love each other.
Shai's not really a complainer, and they're just a really
Drew Holiday. That's my guy. Drew Holiday is my guy.
That's too much basketball for a baseball podcast.
I
knew this about you, Eric. I'm going to talk basketball with you next time. Basketball is my second favorite sport. So
you got a Doug Martin comp in there too. We got some football going across there.
Yeah,
incredible. Of all the nicknames I've ever heard that became public nicknames for a player, that was the worst one, and I'm glad he hated it. He was very clear he never liked that nickname.
Yeah, muscle hamster's rough. That's a rough one. I wouldn't want to be. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like some of the unflattering nicknames I've had. When I was like a husky child, I was Chipmunk because I had kind of like.
That's not nice.
So I had Chipmunk, and then once like the body hair started to come, then like we were all over the map with like, "Hey, Sasquatch." It was like,
thanks.
From Chipmunk to Sasquatch.
But when you're in 8th grade and you just have like full on like,
neck,
you're gonna get it.
So you had a Teen Wolf situation going on.
Hey, Coy Detmer. There you go. There's a good reference for you. Hey, Coy Detmer.
On that note, Eric, before we let you go, anything that you want to promote over at FanGraphs from Prospect Week or otherwise that our listeners should go check out?
Yeah, just go to our website. We're a small but mighty website with a handful of full-time people. Our stat leaderboards are amazing. We now have college stats on the site.
I just saw that. I was looking at Brady Montgomery. The Stanford on there, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's been soft launched this week without a lot of fanfare because we're still getting some of like the dates of birth and like the team abbreviations and some of that stuff settled. But we'll have college stats and college leaderboards will be coming pretty soon. So that's exciting. But yeah, an ad-free subscription at FanGraphs is like $1 a week. for the course of the year. Really, since the pandemic, when ad rates tanked, we've tried to shift to a subscription base, and it's going pretty well. But it's a wonderful gift for yourself or for someone who loves baseball, especially before opening day. And then Kylie McDaniel and I wrote a book 5 years ago, about scouting called Future Value. And if you want in-depth thoughts about some of the stuff that we got into a little bit today, check out the book. It's out in paperback.
Definitely still relevant. It's not 4 years. Doesn't matter. It's still relevant. That's a very good book.
Some of the stuff came true way faster than we would have thought, and we could probably write another update now if we had the time or energy, or if Kylie thought that the bang for your buck for sitting and writing another 40,000 words was worth it.
That's the toughest sell of all, probably at that point. Yeah, that's a mountain to climb. Well, Eric, we appreciate your time, all the hard work you do, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Support FanGraphs. Get a subscription over there. It is like $1 a week. I use it all day, every day, so definitely sub over there. Join our Discord. You can do it with the link in the show description. You can find all of us, except for Eric, on Bluesky. Eno is Sarris.bscoutedSocial. I'm DVR.bscoutedSocial. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.